He told me he had a work emergency, couldn't make it. Real sorry, Mama. I believed him the first few times he used that line. But the night I drove past the restaurant where he claimed he was too slammed to breathe and saw him through the window, laughing, raising a glass, surrounded by people he chose over me, something went very quiet inside me. Not angry quiet, decided quiet. He thought he was protecting his comfort. He had no idea he was handing me the one reason I'd been waiting for.
If you're watching this video, tell me where you're from or what time it is for you. I have always been an early riser. Even now, even at 75, I'm up before 6 most mornings. Old habit from 30 years of shift rotations at Grady Memorial, where I worked as senior record supervisor until I retired. I know how to move quietly through a house before the rest of the world is ready. That morning I woke up, made a pot of coffee, dark roast, 2 sugars, the way Earl always took his, and set the dining table the way my mother taught me to set it when something deserved to be marked. Good plates, the cloth napkins I only bring out for occasions, a small centerpiece I'd put together myself from flowers I bought at the DeKalb Farmers Market the day before. Yellow roses and greenery, nothing complicated. It was my birthday, 75 years old, and I still believe in marking things properly. That's not vanity. That's respect for the life you've lived. I called Darius at 8:15. He answered on the second ring, which already felt like a good sign. He sounded warm, alert. He said, "Mama, happy birthday. You know I'm coming. I'll be there by 6:30 the latest. You want me to bring anything?" I said, "Just yourself, baby, just come." He said he would. I believed him. I spent the rest of the morning in a good mood. I called my sister Paulette in Memphis. We talked for nearly an hour about nothing in particular. Her grandchildren, the new pastor at her church, the mango sorbet she had made from scratch and was very proud of. I ate a late breakfast. I touched up my nails with the bottle of burgundy polish I keep on the bathroom shelf. By 4 o'clock, I had changed into a dress I liked, a deep wine-colored wrap dress Earl had always complimented. By 5, I had reheated the pot of red beans and rice I had made the day before and put the cornbread in the oven. The apartment smelled like a Sunday. By 6:45, Darius had not called. By 7, I had turned off the oven. I sat at the dining table I had set for 2 and looked at the yellow roses. They were still fresh, still standing up straight. I thought about calling him, but something in me said, don't. Not yet. Not with the cornbread still warm. I was still sitting there at 7:30 when my phone buzzed on the counter. It was not Darius. It was my neighbor, Phyllis. Before I get to what Phyllis said, you need to understand something about Earl Carter. Earl was not a loud man. He was not the type to make big speeches or announce his feelings in front of company. He showed you what he meant through what he did. He showed up. He prepared. He thought about consequences 3 steps before most people thought about the first one. We were married for 41 years before his stroke took him at 68. He worked for 30 years as a facilities manager for a commercial property group out of Midtown, and he was careful with every dollar we ever made. Not cheap, careful. There's a difference. When Darius was born, Earl started saving for his education before the boy had a name. When I went back to work after my maternity leave, Earl restructured our account so that I was sole primary holder on everything. Not joint, not co-managed, mine. He said, "Vivienne, a woman needs her name on things. A lot can change. You keep your name on things." I didn't argue. That was never the kind of thing Earl said to be controlling. It was the opposite. He was making sure I couldn't be controlled. After Darius got older and started showing an interest in finance, Earl added him as a managing trustee to several investment accounts. It made sense at the time. Darius was careful too, like his father, and he understood numbers. Earl thought it would be good experience. He thought it would keep Darius involved in the family's future. What neither of us said out loud, what I don't think Earl fully examined, was that Darius came to believe that managing trustee meant co-owner. It didn't. Legally, it never did. But nobody corrected him. And over time, the silence turned into an assumption that hardened into something I can only describe as entitlement. After Earl died, Darius stepped into that trustee role like it was a promotion. He made decisions. He reported to me sometimes. He consulted me occasionally. He never asked me what I wanted done with the money Earl and I had built together. I let it go longer than I should have. That ends when I tell you what Phyllis saw. Darius got together with Renata Cole about 7 years ago. Married her 2 years after that. I want to be fair when I talk about Renata, because fair is what she is owed and what I would want someone to give me. Renata is not a bad person. She is sharp, ambitious, and she loves Darius. I have never doubted that. What I did notice, and kept to myself for a long time, was the way the air changed whenever I was in a room with her and her mother together. Claudette Cole is a woman who has made herself through sheer determination. She owns 4 hair salons across the metro area, runs them tight, and takes great personal pride in what she has built. I respect that. I do. But Claudette has a way of moving through space that communicates, always and without saying it directly, that she has assessed what she is dealing with and made her judgment. When she looked at me, I was a retired hospital administrator from a 2-bedroom apartment in Decatur. Whatever my history was, whatever Earl had built, whatever I had contributed to raising the man her daughter married, none of it registered as currency in Claudette Cole's accounting. After the wedding, the visits slowed down. The calls got shorter. Darius stopped asking my opinion about things. He stopped updating me on decisions that affected us both. When he did call, it was friendly, but it was brief. The way you call an elderly relative you're checking off your list. I didn't make scenes. That is not my way. But I noticed every single time. I want you to understand that by the time my 75th birthday arrived, Darius had not had dinner with me alone in 14 months. I had counted. That's the kind of thing a mother counts. Phyllis Okafor has lived 2 doors down from me for 12 years. She is 71, Nigerian American, a retired school principal who still walks 3 miles every morning regardless of the weather. She texts in full sentences and does not believe in small talk unless it has a point. Her message that evening said, Vivienne. I walked past Phelps Chop House on Peachtree on my way home from my daughter's. I saw Darius's car out front, the black Audi. Earl's old parking permit sticker still on the rear windshield. Thought you were there with him. Then I realized you would have told me. Are you all right? I read it twice. Phelps Chop House is a $40 entree situation. Dim lighting, dark wood. The kind of place where the waiter describes the fish by its first and last name. Earl and I went there exactly twice in our marriage. Once for our 30th anniversary, and once when Darius got his first real job offer. It was not a Tuesday night casual kind of place. I set my phone down on the table next to the cloth napkins I had folded that morning. I did not go straight to the restaurant. I am not an impulsive woman. I sat there for a while and considered other explanations. Work dinner, client meeting, something that required good steak and no advance warning to his mother. Then I thought about the warmth in his voice that morning. How easy he had sounded. How sure. He hadn't sounded like a man who was dreading a conflict or managing a complication. He had sounded like a man who had already arranged things to his satisfaction. I picked up my car keys. I told myself I was just driving, that I didn't have a plan, that I was just going to see. That is mostly true. I parked across the street from Phelps Chop House in a spot that let me see through the front window without being visible from inside. Atlanta night traffic moved around me. A couple walked past on the sidewalk, laughing about something. I sat in the car with the engine off. It didn't take long to find them. Darius was at a corner table near the window. He was wearing the gray suit he had bought last spring, the one Renata had picked out. Renata was beside him in something green and off the shoulder. Claudette was across from them, talking with both hands the way she always does when she is in a good mood. There were flowers on the table. Birthday balloons tied to a chair back, the helium kind, silver and rose gold. In the center of the table was a cake with candles that hadn't been lit yet. From where I sat, I couldn't read it, but I didn't need to. I did the math. Renata's birthday was 4 days after mine. I had known that for 7 years. I had sent a card every year. He had lied to me on my birthday to take her out for hers. I sat in that car for maybe 5 minutes. I did not cry. I did not get out. I didn't call anyone. I just watched the three of them in there, warm and easy in the candlelight, and I noticed the particular quality of my own silence. It did not feel like grief. It felt like clarity. I started the car and drove to Phyllis's apartment. Phyllis opened the door before I knocked. She had seen my headlights in the parking lot. She didn't ask me anything right away. She just stepped back and let me in, and we went out to her small back patio where she keeps 2 folding chairs and a string of lights she leaves up all year. She made tea without asking if I wanted any. We sat there for a while. The city made its usual sounds. Traffic, someone's music 2 floors up, the distant bark of a dog. Atlanta at night is never fully quiet, which I have always found comforting. I told her what I had seen, not with drama, just the facts of it. Phyllis is not the type of woman who fills silence with reassurance. She let me finish, and then she was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "What are you going to do?" Not, "How could he?" or "You poor thing." Just, "What are you going to do?" That question is why she has been my friend for 12 years. I told her I didn't know yet. That was true, but I also knew, sitting there on her patio with both hands wrapped around a warm cup, that I was no longer willing to manage this quietly. I was no longer willing to let things slide so that everyone else stayed comfortable. I had been managing quietly for a long time. It had not changed anything. Phyllis said, "Earl left things arranged a certain way. You told me that once." I said, "Yes." She said, "Then maybe it's time to actually arrange them." I drove home around 10:30. I did not call Darius. I did not send a message. I let him believe his evening had gone the way he planned. I keep a fireproof box on the top shelf of my bedroom closet, behind the hat boxes I never use. Beige metal, combination lock. Earl bought it in 1998 and wrote the combination on the back of a photograph he kept in his wallet. When he died, I found the photograph and put the combination into my phone, just in case. That night I brought the box down, set it on the dining table, the table I had still not cleared, the cloth napkin still folded, and went through everything. Earl had been careful. The trust documents were clear. Primary account holder, Vivienne May Carter. Managing trustee, Darius Earl Carter. The trustee's authority was specific and limited. He could make investment decisions within a defined range. He could not transfer principal without my written authorization. He could not name additional beneficiaries. He could not remove my primary status. I had read these documents before, right after Earl died, and once more when Darius started making decisions without telling me. But sitting there that night, reading them again, something shifted in how they felt. They felt like protection. Earl had structured everything this way on purpose, not by accident, not as a formality. He had thought about this. He had known that without this structure, a grieving widow with a confident adult son and a persuasive daughter-in-law might slowly find herself on the outside of her own life. He built a door I could lock from the inside. I put the documents back, closed the box, and sat at the table for a while in the quiet. Then I went to bed, and I slept better than I had in months. The next morning I called a financial advisor I had worked with years before, a man named Gerald Watkins, who had helped me understand the investment portfolios after Earl died. He had been patient and clear, and I trusted him. His assistant told me Gerald had retired 18 months ago. There was a new advisor taking his clients, someone named Bryce something or other, who had joined the firm from Charlotte. I asked to speak with Bryce. He came on the line, young-voiced and professional. I explained my situation in general terms. He asked me to hold while he pulled my file. The hold music was jazz that had been stretched too thin. When he came back, he was pleasant, but it was clear immediately that he did not know me or my accounts with any depth. He used the phrase, "as I understand it," 3 times in 2 minutes. He suggested we schedule a full intake meeting for the following week. I thanked him and hung up. I sat there for a moment, feeling the specific frustration of losing a handhold you didn't know you were depending on. Then I thought about Loretta. Loretta James had been Earl's contact at the bank long before she was mine. She had come to his funeral. She had called me twice that first year just to check in. She knew my name every time I walked in, and she had never once made me feel like a number. I called the main branch. She was still there, still senior accounts manager. Her assistant put me through in under 2 minutes. Loretta said, "Vivienne Carter. It has been too long." I said, "I need to come see you." She said, "Tomorrow morning. I'll make sure I'm free." The branch on Cascade is the one Earl and I always used. I've been going there since before they renovated it. I know where the water fountain is. I know the security guard's name. It was Hank for years, and now it's Marcus, his nephew, who has the same slow nod. Loretta's office is in the back. Wood-paneled, pictures of her grandchildren, a small plant on the windowsill that she has somehow kept alive for a decade. She hugged me when I walked in and held it an extra second. I spread the documents on her desk. She put on her reading glasses and went through them carefully. She didn't rush. She asked 2 questions, both precise. I answered them. When she finished, she took off her glasses and said, "Everything you're telling me is accurate. These accounts are yours, Vivienne. Darius has trustee authority within these defined parameters. You can modify or suspend that authority as primary holder. You can restructure the allocation. You can freeze his access pending a legal review." I said, "What do I need to do?" She walked me through it. We talked for over an hour. She pulled up the account statements, and we went through them together, line by line. Most of what Darius had done was reasonable. Some of it I had not been informed about. There was a large transfer, in the high 5 figures, to an investment vehicle tied to a company Renata's cousin ran. I had not been asked about it. I had not been notified. I looked at that line item for a long time. Loretta said quietly, "You have every right to act on this." I said, "I know. I'm just making sure I know what I'm acting on." We made an appointment for 2 days later to begin the paperwork. Darius called the morning after the birthday I spent alone. It was 9:47. I know because I was in the middle of writing down questions for Loretta, and I had to set down my pen. He sounded easy, comfortable. He said, "Mama, I'm so sorry about last night. It was a whole thing at the office. You know how it gets. I know it was your birthday, and I feel terrible. Let me take you somewhere nice this weekend. You pick the restaurant." I said, "Of course. That sounds good." He said, "You're not mad?" I said, "We'll talk about it Saturday." He said, "I'll make a reservation somewhere special." I said, "Sounds good, baby." He said he loved me. I said I loved him too. Both of those things were true. That's one of the hard parts of this that I don't think people always understand. The love doesn't go away just because someone has hurt you. It just changes its shape. It becomes something you carry more carefully. After I hung up, I sat for a moment, looking at the notes I'd made. He didn't know I'd been to see Loretta. He didn't know I was meeting with Harriet Odom the following morning. He thought he'd smooth things over with a casual apology and a dinner reservation. He had no idea that while he was at Phelps Chop House raising a glass, I'd already started turning the key. My granddaughter Maya came by that afternoon with a card she had made by hand and a bundle of sunflowers wrapped in brown paper from the Whole Foods on Ponce. Maya is 17. She is Darius's daughter from a relationship he had before Renata, with a woman named Tamika, who moved to Charlotte when Maya was 3. For the first several years of her life, Maya bounced between households and schedules and competing priorities. When she was 9, she started spending stretches of time with me, and somewhere in there, it became the steadiest thing in her life. She sat at my kitchen table eating the leftover cornbread I heated up for her and told me her father had said I had other plans last night. She said it plainly. She's not a child who softens things unnecessarily. I said, "That's not accurate." She looked at me. She has Earl's eyes, the same particular quality of stillness when she's thinking. She said, "So he lied to you." I said, "He told me something that wasn't true." "Yes." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Grandma, I'm sorry. I told her there was nothing for her to be sorry about. I asked her about her biology class and the college essay she was working on and whether she had made a decision about Spelman yet." She talked. I listened. The apartment felt warmer with her in it. Before she left, she hugged me for a long time at the door. She is almost my height now. I thought about what Earl had set up for her, a separate educational trust, structured independently of the main accounts, untouchable by any restructuring I might do. He had put it in place the year she was born, before anyone knew what kind of grandmother I would be to her. That man thought of everything. She was protected. That meant I could act freely. Harriet Odom is 73 years old, 4'11" in heels, and is the most precise person I have ever met in my life, and I worked in hospital records for 30 years. She was Earl's attorney for nearly 2 decades. She came to the funeral in a black dress with a white collar and shook my hand and said, "Earl prepared well. You are going to be all right." She meant it as information, not comfort. I made an appointment and went to her office on a Thursday morning. She had already pulled Earl's trust documents by the time I arrived. She had sticky notes on 4 pages. I told her everything, what I had seen, what Loretta had confirmed, the unauthorized investment transfer. Harriet asked one clarifying question. "Do you want to punish him or correct the situation?" I said, "I want the situation corrected so that he understands the punishment is possible." She nodded once, like I had answered correctly. Then she started talking. Over the next 2 days, we drafted the restructuring plan together. 60% of the trust assets would move into a dedicated educational fund in Maya's name, enough to cover medical school, and then some, the way Earl would have wanted it. 30% would be reserved for my living expenses, health care, travel, and charitable giving. I had a list of 3 organizations Earl cared about. They were going in. The remaining 10% would be released directly to Darius, immediately, with no conditions attached. Clean money, no strings. What came with it was a 12-month review clause. At the end of that period, I retained full discretion to revise the allocation based on whatever had changed between us. That clause was Harriet's idea. She said, "Don't close every door. Just make sure they open from the inside." The documents were ready to sign within the week. I told Harriet I wanted to deliver them myself. She said, "I thought you would." Darius works at a commercial real estate firm downtown in a building on Marietta Street. 12 floors, glass and gray stone, a lobby that echoes. I had been there twice. Once for a company event he invited me to, once to drop off something he had left at my apartment. I wore my good black blazer and the pearl earrings Earl gave me for our 20th anniversary. I was carrying my handbag and Harriet's folder, and I was perfectly calm. The receptionist was a young woman who looked up with the automatic smile of someone trained to manage whatever walked through the door. She asked if I had an appointment. I said, "Please tell Darius Carter his mother is here." She hesitated just briefly. Then she made the call. I stood at the desk and looked around the lobby. Marble floors. The kind of art on the walls that doesn't mean anything but cost a great deal. A water feature in the corner that nobody was looking at. Darius came out of the elevator 4 minutes later. He was in a white dress shirt, sleeves rolled up. He smiled when he saw me, but the smile had a question in it. He said, "Mama, what are you doing here? Everything okay?" I said, "Everything's fine. I just need to give you something. Is there somewhere we can sit for a moment?" He brought me to a small conference room off the lobby. Glass walls, a table for 6. He closed the door. He sat down across from me with the expression of a man trying to determine whether he should be concerned. I opened the folder. I took out the document package. Harriet had organized it cleanly, tabbed and labeled, and I slid it across the table to him. I said, "Take your time with this. Read it when I leave. I'll be across the street at the coffee shop on the corner. I'll be there for 40 minutes. He looked at the folder. He looked at me. He said, "Mama, what is this?" I said, "It's an explanation. Read it first." I picked up my handbag and walked out of the conference room. I did not rush. I did not look back. I walked through the lobby, past the water feature nobody was watching, and out through the glass doors into the Atlanta morning. The coffee shop was called Paper and Grounds. Dark wood, local art on the walls, the smell of espresso and something with cinnamon. I found a table by the window that looked out toward the building. I ordered chamomile tea. I did not look at my phone. I thought about Earl. I thought about the way he used to sit with decisions, not avoiding them, just holding them until he was sure he understood all the weight. I used to tease him about it. "You overthink everything, Earl." He would say, "No, I just think all the way through." I sat with my tea, and I thought all the way through. At 19 minutes past when I had sat down, the door to the coffee shop opened. Darius came in still carrying the folder. His tie was loosened. His face was doing something complicated. He stopped just inside the door and looked at me. I didn't wave him over. I didn't change my expression. I just waited. He walked to my table and sat down across from me. For a moment, neither of us said anything. Then he said, "When did you do all this?" I said, "I've been doing it for a little while." He said, "Mom," I said, "you should order something. This is going to take a few minutes." He did not order anything. He put the folder on the table between us and pushed it back toward me like he was returning something he hadn't asked for. He said, "This isn't legal. I'm a named trustee. You can't just—" I said, "Harriet Odom drew up those documents. You can call her if you want to discuss the legality." He stopped. Harriet was Earl's attorney. Darius knew what that meant. He also knew, or should have known, that Harriet did not make errors. He tried a different angle. He said, "Dad told me these accounts were going to be mine eventually. That was his intention." I said, "Earl left a very clear document that describes his intentions. What he intended was for me to be taken care of. What he intended was for you to help with that, not to manage it as your own." He said, "Mama, be honest. Are you doing this because of the birthday?" And here is where I had to be careful, because the answer was yes and no, and neither of those answers alone was the truth. I said, "I'm doing this because I drove past Phelps Chop House on my birthday and saw you through the window with your wife and your mother-in-law celebrating a birthday that was not mine. After you told me you had a work emergency. After you've been unavailable for nearly every occasion that mattered to me for the past 3 years. This is not about one dinner. This is about a pattern. And I am done letting that pattern continue without consequence." He opened his mouth and closed it again. Then he said something I had not anticipated. He said, "I didn't know you were that unhappy." I said, "That is exactly the problem, Darius." He went quiet. He looked out the window. I told him about the unauthorized transfer to the investment account tied to Renata's cousin's company. He didn't deny it. He said he had thought it was a good opportunity and that he didn't think I would mind. I said, "You didn't think I would mind? Or you didn't ask because you knew I would have questions?" He didn't answer that. What he did next was the part that slowed things down. He challenged the trustee language in the documents. He said his own attorney, a man at the firm he used for real estate contracts, had told him years ago that his trustee designation was functionally equivalent to co-ownership. I said, Harriet's documentation addresses that interpretation directly. He said he wanted to see the counter-argument in writing before he accepted any of this. I said, that's fair. Harriet can provide it. It will take a few days. And so we were not done, not yet. He left without resolution. I sat in the coffee shop for another 20 minutes after he walked out, finishing my tea looking at the street. A few days. That was all it would take. But I want you to understand what those few days felt like. Holding everything in place, waiting for the paperwork to be finalized, while Darius went home and almost certainly talked to his attorney, and possibly to Renata, and possibly to Claudette. I had the ground under me, but I could feel him looking for soft spots. Harriet called me that evening and said, "Give me 3 days. I want to add something I should have included from the beginning." I said, "What is it?" She said, "A letter. I found it this morning when I went back through Earl's original file. He left instructions for it to be included in the event the trust structure was ever challenged." I said, "A letter from Earl?" She said, "Yes. I don't know why I didn't find it before. It was behind another document in the physical file. I'm sorry for the delay." I sat down. I said, "What does it say?" She said, "You should read it yourself. I'll have it tomorrow." The letter was 2 pages, handwritten on the yellow legal pad paper Earl used for everything he considered important. His handwriting, small, even, and slanted slightly to the right, was familiar to me in my chest before I had read a single word. Harriet had it in a sealed envelope. She handed it to me at the beginning of our appointment and stepped out to give me privacy. I sat at her conference table and opened it. I'm not going to share everything in that letter. Some of it is between Earl and me and will stay that way. But I will tell you what he wrote about Darius, because it is the part that settled everything. He wrote, "I have tried to raise a man who understands that what we build means nothing if we lose each other in the building. I believe in Darius. I believe he is capable of becoming that man. But I also know my son. I know how easy it is to let ambition blur what matters. If you are reading this because someone has challenged what I left behind, then something has already gone wrong. The accounts and the properties and the numbers are not the point. The point is that Vivienne made this possible. Not me, not both of us equally. Her steadiness, her patience, her 30 years of showing up at that hospital so that I could take chances and build things. That is where this came from. She is the source of this. Act accordingly." I folded the letter and held it in my lap for a while. Then I called Harriet back in and told her we were ready to finalize. When the counter documentation arrived at Darius's attorney 2 days later, Earl's letter was included. I did not warn Darius it was coming. He called me that evening. His voice sounded different, quieter. He said, "Mama, I read what Dad wrote." I said, "I know." He said, "I didn't know he felt that way." I said, "You would have known if you had been paying attention." He was silent for a moment. Then he said, "What do I have to do?" 3 days after the documents were finalized, Renata called me. Not Darius, Renata. She called in the middle of the afternoon on a Tuesday. I was in the middle of sorting some things in my bedroom closet, and I almost let it go to voicemail. "I'm glad I didn't." She said, "Miss Vivienne, I hope it's okay that I'm calling." I said, "Of course, Renata." She took a breath. Then she said, "I want to ask you something directly, and I need you to know I'm not calling to argue or to take sides." I said, "All right." She said, Did Darius tell you he had a work emergency on your birthday? Is that what he said? I said, yes. She was quiet for a moment. She said, he told me you had called earlier in the week to say you had other plans that evening, that you had a dinner with friends and you didn't want to combine the celebrations. I thought it was your choice to spend your birthday separately. I let that settle. I said, that is not what happened. She said, I know that now. What followed was a conversation that was careful and slow and did not resolve into anything clean. Renata said she was not asking me to forgive anything yet. She said she was asking me to know that she had not been a participant in the lie, that she had believed something that turned out not to be true. I believed her, not entirely, and not without reservations about the years of being made to feel peripheral, and the investment transfer and the general architecture of being managed out of my own son's life. But about that specific lie, on that specific night, I believe she had not known. She said, I don't know what's going to happen with the two of them right now, but I want you to know I'm not your enemy. I said, I appreciate you telling me this directly. She said, Earl used to say you were the strongest woman he knew. I said, Earl had good judgment. There was a pause that had some warmth in it. Then she said good night and hung up. I stood in my bedroom for a while afterward. The conversation had not fixed anything, but it had changed the shape of what needed to be fixed. Darius hadn't just lied to me. He had managed Renata too. He had constructed a version of events that protected him on both sides. That told me something about what I was actually dealing with. Not a man who had drifted into carelessness, a man who arranged his arrangements deliberately. That's harder, but it's cleaner than not knowing. I expected to hear from Claudette Cole. I know how she operates. She is a woman who inserts herself when her family's interests are involved. She had opinions about the wedding venue, the honeymoon destination, and where Darius and Renata should buy their first home. She had never been shy about making those opinions audible to everyone in range. I expected a call, maybe two. I expected something in the register of Vivienne. I think we need to talk like adults. I expected her to have a position and a strategy. She did not call. She did not send a message. She did not show up. Her silence, when I thought about it, told me more than anything she might have said. Claudette Cole knows which way the wind is blowing at all times. She is not a woman who spends energy where the outcome has already been decided. Her silence was its own form of concession. I'm not going to pretend I didn't feel some satisfaction about that. I am 75 years old. I'm allowed. 6 weeks after all of it, Darius called and asked if he could come for dinner. Not Saturday, not the nice restaurant, my apartment. Just the two of us. He came on a Wednesday evening. He wore jeans and an old Morehouse sweatshirt I hadn't seen in years. He brought a bottle of red wine I recognized. It was Earl's preferred label, a Napa cab we used to keep in the house for special occasions. I don't know where he found it. I made roast chicken and green beans with garlic and rice, and I did not set the table with the good plates. I used the everyday plates because this was not a performance. This was just supper. He sat at the kitchen counter while I finished the rice, and we talked about small things first. His work. Maya's college applications. The crack in my bathroom ceiling I'd been ignoring for 2 months. The ordinary maintenance of a shared life. Then he said, Mama, I've been trying to figure out what to say. I said, you don't have to have it perfect. Just say what's true. He said, what's true is that I convinced myself you were fine, that you didn't need things the way you used to, that I could be less present because you were capable and steady, and you always said you were okay. And I used that as permission to stop paying attention. I turned the burner off and looked at him. He said, I used Dad's name on those accounts like it was something I had earned. It wasn't. I know that now. I said, what changed? He said, reading his letter, that and Renata telling me what she told you on the phone. He looked down at the counter. He said, I didn't know she called you. I said, she did. He said, what did you think of what she said? I said, "I thought she was telling the truth." He looked up. There was something in his face that I recognized, the specific relief of a person who expected worse than they got. I recognized it because I have felt it. Because Earl used to give it to me sometimes when I had braced myself for a harder landing. We ate dinner. We didn't fix everything. We did not have the conversation that would undo the years of being handled at arm's length, or the investment transfer, or the fact that I sat alone at a table I had set for two on my 75th birthday. There is no dinner that does all of that. But he stayed 3 hours. He helped me wash the dishes. He asked me to tell him about the summer his father and I drove to the Outer Banks when Darius was 6, and he listened the whole way through without looking at his phone once. When he left, he stood at the door for a moment and said, "I'm going to do better. I know that's not enough right now, but I'm going to do it." I said, "I know you will. Your father's son is still in there somewhere." He hugged me. I let it last. Maya got into the early decision program at Spelman, pre-med track, full need-based aid package, and the educational trust Earl set up to cover the rest. She called me before she called anyone else. I heard her voice break on the other end of the line, and I sat down on the edge of my bed and pressed the phone hard against my ear and just listened to her cry the good kind of tears. I drove over that evening with a card I had written by hand and a small box wrapped in silver paper. Inside was a pair of pearl earrings, not the anniversary ones Earl gave me. Those are staying with me. These were my mother's, a smaller, plainer pair she wore every single day of her adult life. I had been keeping them in the carved box on my bedroom shelf for 20 years, waiting to know who they belonged to. I knew now. Maya opened the box and looked at them for a long time without saying anything. Then she looked up at me and said, "Grandma, these are from your mother." I said, "Now they're from both of us." She put them on right there in the kitchen. She took a picture and sent it to her father before I had even sat down. Darius texted me that night at 9:43. He said, "Thank you for not giving up on her, or me." I read it once. I set the phone on the nightstand. I turned out the light. Outside, Atlanta was doing what it always does, moving, humming, the distant sound of life continuing. I lay in the dark and I thought about Earl, about the letter he wrote, about the way he saw everything coming and still chose to believe his son would find his way back. He was right. He usually was. I don't know what happens next. I know the accounts are arranged the way they should be. I know Harriet's documents are filed, and Loretta has everything updated. I know Maya is going to Spelman in the fall. I know Darius came to dinner last Wednesday and brought a bottle of wine and stayed until almost 10 and washed the dishes without being asked. I know Claudette has not called. I know Renata sent me a birthday card last week, late, handwritten, short. She said she was sorry for the belated and that she hoped I had been able to celebrate properly this year. She signed it with her full name. I put it on the refrigerator with a magnet. I am 75 years old. I live in Decatur, Georgia, in a 2-bedroom apartment full of Earl's furniture and Maya's drawings and books, stacked in every room the way they have always been stacked. I am not fragile. I am not invisible. I am not anyone's afterthought. I am Vivienne May Carter, and I have spent my whole life building things that last. My name is on all of them. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from, or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you are here.